Breaking. King Charles has just interrupted a live parliamentary session, and what he said to Keir Starmer has sent Westminster into absolute meltdown. The Prime Minister stood frozen, unable to respond, while more than 200 MPs watched in stunned silence. Within minutes, 3 cabinet ministers walked out, and what unfolded in the next 60 seconds could bring this government down before the week is over. If you want to understand how this constitutional crisis is spiraling out of control, subscribe to UK Housing Insight now, because what happens next will shock you to your core. Here is what triggered the most unprecedented royal intervention in modern British history. At precisely 2:17 p.m. today, Starmer was addressing Parliament on his controversial new housing bill. It was routine Westminster theatre. Ministers nodded. Backbenchers checked their phones, nothing unusual, until protocol itself was shattered. Suddenly, the sergeant-at-arms entered, carrying the ceremonial black rod. Every MP instantly understood the gravity. The monarch was summoning Parliament immediately, something that simply does not happen during live proceedings. Starmer stopped mid-sentence, his face drained of colour. Within 90 seconds, chaos erupted as MPs were marched toward the House of Lords. Inside the Lord's chamber, the atmosphere was electric. King Charles stood at the throne, but without crown or ceremonial robes. He wore a simple dark suit and looked visibly exhausted. When formalities were about to begin, he raised his hand and quietly said, "That will not be necessary." His next words stunned the room. He declared he had watched this government drive Britain toward a constitutional precipice, and that remaining silent any longer would make him complicit. The chamber exploded. Shouts echoed from Conservative benches. Labour MPs looked horrified. The Speaker repeatedly banged the gavel, but no one listened. Starmer stood motionless, sources say, unable to process what was happening. The monarch had just accused the Prime Minister of constitutional vandalism in front of the entire British establishment. Then came the moment cameras caught live. Transport Secretary Louise Hay stood up and walked out. Moments later, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper followed, then Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson. 3 cabinet ministers gone in under 2 minutes. The optics were devastating, but the most explosive moment was yet to come. King Charles revealed he had received over 14,000 letters from ordinary British citizens alarmed by the direction of the country. Not activists, he stressed. Grandmothers from Cornwall, factory workers from Birmingham, teachers from Edinburgh. Many, he warned, were terrified by housing displacement and the erosion of long-standing protections. Constitutional experts immediately reacted. Professor Helena Wilkinson of Cambridge told BBC News the monarch had effectively weaponised public opinion against the Prime Minister, calling it political warfare rather than symbolic monarchy. Then Charles produced a letter from a 94-year-old Second World War veteran from Cardiff, Albert Hughes, a man who stormed Normandy, liberated camps and rebuilt Europe. Now being told his council flat would be converted into asylum accommodation with just 6 weeks' notice. Gasps filled the chamber. "Is this what I fall for?" the veteran asked. The king admitted he had no answer, only the belief that a government treating its heroes this way forfeits its moral authority. Silence followed. MPs on both sides sat stunned. Across Britain, veterans from the Falklands, Iraq and Afghanistan are sleeping in cars while housing policy collapses under pressure. This is no longer politics. This is a national reckoning, and as UK Housing Insight has warned, the housing crisis is now shaking the foundations of British democracy itself. While David sleeps rough, Parliament has just approved an additional £8 billion in foreign aid. We are talking about luxury accommodation for asylum seekers in 4-star hotels. We are talking about translation services in 47 languages. We are talking about legal aid packages that cost more than most British families earn in 5 years. The contrast is so brutal, so morally bankrupt, that even lifelong Labour voters are now turning away in open disgust. Margaret Bennett, a 69-year-old grandmother from Sheffield who voted Labour for 50 years, recorded a tearful video that has gone viral. "I believed in this party," she said. "I believe they cared about people like me. But when they ignore our veterans and roll out red carpets for people who've never contributed a penny, I can't support that anymore. I just can't." That video reached 1.8 million views in just 6 hours. The comments section is flooded with thousands of similar stories. Working class Britons who feel abandoned by the very party that once claimed to represent them. As UK Housing Insight has repeatedly warned, housing policy is no longer about shelter. It has become a symbol of who this country chooses to protect. And it gets worse. While veterans like David Morrison sleep on the streets, leaked documents show the Home Office spent £127 million last year on hotel accommodation for asylum seekers alone. That is £338,000 every single day. Meanwhile, the Royal British Legion confirms that more than 6,000 veterans are currently homeless across the UK. Government figures also reveal veterans wait an average of 14 months for NHS mental health treatment. 14 months. By contrast, asylum seekers receive immediate healthcare, immediate housing and immediate financial support. Janet Williams, a 58-year-old nurse from Leeds, whose father served in the Royal Navy for 3 decades, told The Telegraph, "My dad can't get a hip replacement, but we're funding luxury hotel stays for people who arrived last week. Where is the justice in that?" Her interview was shared 450,000 times on Facebook. This anger is not coming from the far right. It is coming from ordinary British families who now feel like strangers in their own country, and the polls confirm the scale of the collapse. A Snap survey conducted just 2 hours after the King's intervention showed Labour support crashing from 38% to 24% in a single afternoon. In traditional Labour strongholds like Manchester, Liverpool and Birmingham, some constituencies recorded drops of 20 points. This is not a polling error. This is a political earthquake unfolding in real time. Then something even more unprecedented happened. After 3 cabinet ministers walked out, King Charles referenced a specific government policy by name. Levelling Down Britain Act, he said with barely concealed contempt, is perhaps the most Orwellian piece of legislation I have encountered in my lifetime. He accused it of stripping communities of autonomy while pretending to empower them and of being rushed through Parliament in the hope no one would read it properly. Palace insiders revealed Charles spent 3 weeks personally reviewing the bill line by line. He consulted constitutional scholars from Oxford and Cambridge and met privately with former prime ministers from both parties, including Tony Blair, Gordon Brown and Theresa May. All warned him the legislation would fundamentally alter the balance between Westminster and the Crown. Sources say the King was furious, but restrained himself until Starmer announced plans to fast-track the bill through the Lords using emergency procedures. That was the breaking point. At 7:30 p.m. last night, Charles summoned his private secretary and dictated the speech that would shake Parliament. Aides reportedly pleaded with him to stop. "This will destroy your relationship with the government," one warned. Charles replied coldly, "Then let it be destroyed. I will not watch this country fall into constitutional chaos while I play dress-up in a palace." What followed reveals how deep this crisis truly runs. On Sunday evening, Charles held a secret 4-hour meeting with the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. One palace aide later revealed the Archbishop warned him, "You may save the country, but you could destroy the Crown." Charles's response was immediate. "The Crown is nothing if it cannot protect the people it serves." Those words are now legendary inside Buckingham Palace, and they underline a devastating truth. A constitutional monarchy survives on moral authority. And tonight, Starmer's government has lost every last shred of it. A leaked recording from a private Labour fundraiser on Saturday night captures the Prime Minister's voice with chilling clarity. Charles thinks he's still relevant, Starmer can be heard saying as donors laugh. Someone needs to remind him it's 2025, not 1925. The Crown is a relic. We're just too polite to say it publicly. When that audio leaked at 6,000 today, just 3 hours after the King's intervention, social media detonated. Within 20 minutes, the hashtag Starmer insults King surged to #1. Even committed Republicans recoiled at the sheer disrespect. The timing could not have been worse. It appeared to validate everything Charles had warned about. As UK Housing Insight has repeatedly highlighted, political arrogance at the top always spills into economic pain at the bottom. The market reaction was immediate and brutal. Within 30 minutes of the King's speech, the pound fell 2% against the dollar. A staggering £7 billion was wiped off the FTSE 100 in a single session. Global investors may ignore British drama, but they never ignore instability, and stability had just evaporated. Currency traders in Hong Kong, Singapore and New York began shorting the pound at levels not seen since the Liz Truss mini-budget collapse. At 4:15 p.m. London Time. Goldman Sachs warned clients that UK political risk was now comparable to emerging markets and advised defensive positioning. Deutsche Bank went further, urging a 30% reduction in UK exposure. The consequences are punishing. Britain's borrowing costs surged, meaning higher mortgage rates for homeowners, higher loan rates for small businesses, and increased pressure on public finances. Every housing payment just became more expensive overnight. Chancellor Rachel Reeves watched £47 billion vanish in real time, fully aware the coming days could erase billions more. Sensing blood in the water, the Conservative Party immediately tabled a vote of no confidence. Rishi Sunak, silent for months, emerged with a speech that cut straight through Westminster. When the King of England feels forced to intervene because Parliament has lost its way, he said, that is not a constitutional crisis, that is a failure of leadership. Tory MPs rose in a standing ovation. Labour benches sat frozen. Online, the reaction was volcanic. King Charles Speaks trended globally within 40 minutes, topping charts in 73 countries. British social media became a battleground. Monarchists celebrated, Republicans raged, but the shock was how many traditional Labour voters sided openly with the King. A lifelong socialist posting as working-class Nan wrote, "Never thought I'd say this, but the King showed more backbone than the entire government. Maybe we backed the wrong horse." The post received 340,000 likes. TikTok flooded with videos defending Charles. A 22-year-old student from Manchester posted a tearful clip explaining why she was abandoning Labour. "I thought I was progressive," she said, "but watching the King defend our values while Starmer tears them down, I realised I was wrong." The video reached 7 million views in 5 hours. The Labour Party did not just lose a news cycle, it lost a generation. International reaction followed swiftly. Canada's Prime Minister publicly backed constitutional monarchy and parliamentary tradition. In Australia, opposition leaders called for renewed respect for Westminster norms. Even the French president, no friend of monarchy, praised institutional stability. Then came the most damaging response of all. At 11:30 a.m. Washington time, the White House issued a carefully worded statement affirming the special relationship while expressing concern over current political uncertainty. In diplomatic language, that phrase signals danger. US investors read it clearly and began pulling capital from UK markets. Britain was no longer facing a domestic crisis. The world was now watching it unravel on the global stage. Inside number 10, witnesses describe utter chaos. Starmer called an emergency cabinet meeting for 4 p.m. Only 11 of 22 ministers attended. The rest had resigned, refused, or suddenly developed scheduling conflicts. Angela Rayner was absent, with aides citing a family emergency. To many inside Westminster, it looked less like leadership and more like a government abandoning ship. Nobody believed it at first, but sources now confirm she was meeting quietly with backbench MPs, sounding out support for a leadership challenge. One Labour MP who attended described the mood as a coup in slow motion. Rayner allegedly told them, "Starmer is finished. The question is whether we all go down with him or act now to save the party." That is not the language of a loyal deputy. That is the language of a challenger preparing to strike. Chancellor Rachel Reeves did attend the emergency cabinet meeting, but witnesses say she spent most of it staring at her phone. When Starmer demanded her attention, she reportedly looked up and said coldly, "I'm dealing with the economic crisis you just created." The room fell silent. One minister later said that was the exact moment everyone realised Starmer had lost control entirely. Even his closest allies were turning. Junior ministers were overheard in Westminster corridors openly discussing succession plans. WhatsApp groups with names like Real Labour and Future Forward were actively plotting Starmer's removal. The messages were merciless. "He's finished. The King destroyed him. We need to move fast," one MP wrote. Another replied, "Rayner or Reeves." A third summed it up bluntly, "Anyone but Starmer." Then came the truly explosive twist. Screenshots leaked to The Sun reveal some Labour MPs are not just planning a leadership change. They are discussing forming an entirely new party. Labour is dead. The brand is toxic. One message reads, "New name, new leadership, new values." Another MP replied, "Call it the British Workers' Party. Go after Reform UK voters." This is no longer an internal rebellion. This is the early stage of a party split that could permanently reshape British politics. Veteran Labour MP Barry Gardner did not hold back. In 30 years in Parliament, he told Sky News, "I've never seen a Prime Minister lose control this quickly." The King did not just criticise policy, he questioned Starmer's judgment, integrity and fitness to govern. In Westminster terms, that is career-ending. Inside number 10, sources say Starmer appeared broken. He paced like a caged animal, snapping at aides, refusing calls. One advisor told The Times the Prime Minister was unrecognisable, paranoid, convinced everyone was plotting against him. Another said he was spiralling into conspiracy theories, blaming the palace, the media, anyone except himself. The man who promised competence now looks completely overwhelmed. As UK Housing Insight has warned, political collapse at the top always feeds instability in housing, markets and public confidence. But the revelation that could destroy the government entirely is still coming. Leaked documents obtained by The Telegraph show Starmer's team knew for 3 weeks that King Charles opposed the Levelling Down Britain Act. Palace officials issued repeated warnings, formal letters, private meetings, even a direct personal message from the King. Downing Street ignored every single one. If these documents are authentic, and multiple sources confirm they are, then this was not a miscalculation. It was a deliberate provocation. Starmer was warned certain legislation crossed constitutional red lines. He pushed ahead anyway, betting the King would not dare intervene publicly. That gamble just cost him his government. The optics are catastrophic. It shows Starmer did not respect the Crown, Parliament, or the constitutional framework holding Britain together. One leaked message from a senior Downing Street aide reads, "PM believes King is bluffing. Push through before he can react." That message was sent just 48 hours before the intervention. They knew. They gambled. They lost. And there is one final layer that makes this even worse. The same leaked files reveal Starmer's advisors ran private polling 3 weeks ago asking whether voters would side with the government if the King opposed them publicly. 67% said they would side with the King. Only 18% backed the government. Starmer saw those numbers and pushed ahead anyway. Think about that. He had hard data proving this would be political suicide. He ignored it out of pure arrogance. Now he faces a vote of no confidence, mass resignations, collapsing polls, and a party on the brink of fracture. This is no longer incompetence. This is political suicide by choice.